The tactics of mining companies in pursuit of coal and coal seam gas extraction under privately owned properties is now a policy headache for the O'Farrell government. Shortly I'll be putting questions about this to the Premier Barry O'Farrell, who dropped in for a chat this morning. Also on the agenda, this week's reports into the Keneally government's partial privatisation of electricity assets late last year and the future of the industry. First, let's tackle the issue of deceptive tactics by mining companies. Mr Premier, welcome back. Do you think mining companies should declare their interests up front when seeking to acquire rural properties?
Well, I certainly think it's concerning that those seeking to buy properties, whether they're mining companies or someone else, aren't prepared to be upfront about it.
What can you do about it? Because it's not illegal, but it certainly seems to be deceptive.
Well, it's not illegal. You know, we have in a variety of areas people who use third parties in order to purchase goods and properties. But I'm happy to raise with both the Minister for Mining as well as the Minister for Fair Trading whether, given the concerns around the discord between agriculture and mining, whether anything is able to be done.
Because it's a tactic that could be deployed to get around lock the gate. You don't have to worry about lock the gate if you're a mining company because you can buy the property.
Well, the concern when people go to these lengths is what are they hiding? I'm not sure that the mining sector wants to be seen to be hiding anything and therefore they should be operating openly in full view of the public so that everyone understands what's happening.
The New South Wales farmers, Mr Premier, are threatening to withdraw from your stakeholder references group looking at this vexed issue of land use, agriculture and aquifer protection. Don't they have just cause in getting out because nothing has happened from your government to give certainty to rural communities about aquifer and food bowl protection?
Well, firstly, we don't want New South Wales farmers to walk away from the table. They haven't done it yet. As I understand it, the President of New South Wales Farmers and the Planning Minister who's overseeing this process are talking regularly. But it is true, it is vexed, it is difficult. It's one of the many problems left to the new government by the outgoing government. And whilst they didn't care about these issues, we do. So there's two things we're putting together. Firstly is an aquifer policy to ensure that whether mining, whether coal mining or whether some other use, we have proper rules, proper processes that seek to protect aquifers and groundwater. And secondly, through the strategic land use policy, which we are keen to have the ongoing input of New South Wales farmers into, we want to put in place for the first time in New South Wales a policy that allows the competing interests in a piece of land to be properly weighed, environmental, scientific, community, so that transparent decisions can be made about particular areas.
What's the timeline? When? Because the distress is palpable now and people want certainty now. They want prohibition now and quarantining of land to protect the aquifer in particular.
Well, no one wants it to happen more than me. No one gets around and talks to people about these issues more than me. In the last week I've been to both the North Coast, also the North West, where the issues have been raised with me. They're raised with me almost every other day in Sydney. So no one's keener than me. What we're determined to do, though, is make sure that we operate on the basis of fact.
You've got a moratorium on new coal seam gas licences, but that doesn't stop existing licences. Why not a moratorium on any further coal seam gas and coal mining while we sort out aquifer and food bowl protection?
Well, one of the problems we have, Quentin, not just in this area but in other areas, is that under the former government, under the former rules, a variety of commitments were entered into. We need to ensure that we don't in any way open up taxpayers to claims of compensation by actions that we take. That's what makes this difficult.
What we're getting from these communities is not only distress but real concern that while there may have been a change of government, they're still dealing with the same bureaucrats and there's been no attitudinal change. The motivation of government seems to be, let's get these coal projects up because of the macroeconomic benefits to New South Wales, forget about the locals.
Well, no, I think that's false. I think if you talk to the Planning Minister who's oversighting the process, what he's been very keen to do is ensure that both the science and the community get heard for the first time in this process. What we've seen an end to is what happened under the former government, where exploration licences, leases, were sold for huge amounts of money, regardless of the impact upon local areas. Quentin, I'm one of those that is very concerned about the alienation of prime agricultural land for mining and other purposes without proper regard to the long-term future interests of this state.
Now, the big questions about the future of the electricity industry. After a 7-month inquiry behind closed doors, Brian Tamblin QC has found there was no impropriety by the former Labor government. Total proceeds of $5.3 billion were said to have exceeded the combined retention value of the assets. But Mr Tamblin declined to reveal how this was calculated. It's commercial in confidence. So, after years of bitter debate, we still don't know the assumptions behind the retention value calculation. Mr Tamblin asserts, however, that the state did receive value for money. He recommends all remaining electricity assets be leased or sold. The government should also consider selling the poles and wires, the distribution networks. This is the retention value calculation all blanked out. How contemptuous is that? You said in your election document that you were going to be honest with the people of New South Wales. Again, a very difficult issue for government about the privatisation of the electricity assets. Will you fill in these blanks?
Well, that decision was made, of course, arm's length from government by Justice Tamblin, who undertook the inquiry for us. That's Mr Challin's consultant's report to the electricity inquiry. I assume the decision has been made by Mr Tamblin for good reason, but I'm certainly happy to check it.
Because the bidders, potential bidders, in the event that the Cabinet does decide to sell the remaining assets, the potential bidders already know the values of the generation output, and they certainly know the price of they paid for the retailers. The filling in these blanks would help you and the public understand what would be involved, the benefits and downsides of further privatisation, would they not?
Well, certainly, Quentin, when I saw the report on Monday, I was probably equally surprised as you by the blank bits in the report. I haven't had the opportunity to have that checked at this stage. I assume that as part of the Cabinet discussions, the Cabinet in confidence discussions, those figures will not be blanked out, so that the decision the government makes by Christmas will be based on the best possible statistics.
How is it that Brian Tamblin declares the state has received value for money, yet in his audit of the sale, the Auditor-General Peter Achterstraat declares a loss of $1.85 billion for the sale of Delta West and Eraring generation, and the Auditor-General notes the proceeds from selling the generation output represented less than half of the value of government power station assets at the time of the sale.
Well, that's one of the issues that Cabinet will have to grapple with over the next couple of months, because clearly you have two competing claims now, one by the Tamblin inquiry, one by the Auditor-General. They both can't be right. And what Cabinet will, as part of its decision-making process, do is make a judgment on which one is correct.
The Coalition's 2011 election manifesto said at item 9 that, if elected, you would retain the ownership of the poles and wires in public hands. Will you honour that commitment?
Well, importantly, Quentin, what it said at item 2 or 3 was that we'd have an inquiry into the electricity sector in New South Wales to set the course forward. In the terms of reference,
retain the ownership of the poles and wires in public hands. Will you honour that commitment?
Item 2 or 3, Quentin, we set up an inquiry. The terms of reference that were released, not only...
So you're giving yourself wriggle room. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, what I'm saying to you, Quentin, is we couldn't have been clearer about this. Item 2 or 3, which committed to the inquiry, we actually put draft terms of reference out on the 20th of February. Those terms of reference didn't put any limits on what an independent inquiry would do. Why? Because unlike the former government, we want to take the politics out of this and get the best outcome for the people of this state in terms of lower prices for families and lower prices for small businesses. And that's what we'll be guided by as Cabinet seeks to discuss these issues.
The inquiry gazumps item 9, retaining the poles and wires in public ownership.
Well, no, the inquiry was announced before item 9. The inquiry terms of reference that were put in that document clearly said that the whole of the sector would be examined. So, Quentin, no decisions have been made. Don't get carried away before decisions are made. By Christmas, you'll have your answer. You can come back from holidays and interview me the day after if you want to, because we'll be making a decision in the best interest of the people of this state.
You have no mandate from the people of New South Wales at the election in 2011 to privatise these assets.
We had a mandate from the public to put in place an inquiry. Quentin, the easiest decision for us to have taken before the election was to rule out any further privatisations of the state's electricity assets. We didn't do that. We did what we thought was right, which was put in place an expert inquiry to guide future decisions based on what will keep prices lowest for people across this state.
Mr Premier, thanks very much.
Thank you.